Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. Of course, we're starting with this story first. It's the 1-year anniversary of Yevgeny Prigozhin's failed coup attempt, or failed mutiny, or failed whatever you want to call it. In Russia, Prigozhin is remembered as a great man. The mercenary chief died in a plane crash 2 months after calling off his thunder run to Moscow. So Prigozhin was an idiot. He was an idiot because he believed he could enter into a peace deal with Putin and Putin would honor it. The deal was he would accept exile in Belarus, living with Lukashenko, and then all of his soldiers would be pardoned for the mutiny. But of course, Putin had him killed, along with all his top generals, at the first opportunity. So for fun, here are some pictures of Russians mourning the loss of Yevgeny Prigozhin and Dmitry Utkin, who was covered in Nazi tattoos. And something tells me a year from now there won't be any memorials and nobody will be remembering Yevgeny Prigozhin, but for the 1-year anniversary, sure, Russia, he was a hero. Let's actually follow up on Putin's visit to North Korea, because there are wider geopolitical ramifications from this visit that Putin didn't foresee. South Korea summons the Russian ambassador over Pyongyang's new defense pact with the North Koreans. So Putin signed a piece of paper with Kim Jong-un saying that if North Korea gets into a war, Russia will help North Korea. The assumption being that that evil imperialistic United States wants to attack North Korea. But what if North Korea starts the war? North Korea fires first and gets into a shooting war with the South Koreans. This is what has South Korea concerned. Putin also does not rule out sending weapons to North Korea. Weapons that would most likely be used against the South Koreans. So for the South Koreans, they're taking this personal, that Putin would show up on their peninsula, promising to arm and defend their sworn enemy, the Kim regime. So South Korea is now considering supplying lethal aid to Ukraine. Up until this point, South Korea has only provided financial and humanitarian relief because they didn't want Russia involved in the politics on their peninsula. South Korea was being cautious. And Putin didn't consider at all the ramifications of getting involved in Korean politics. So Putin is now trying to threaten South Korea, saying it would be a big mistake if they start supplying weapons to Ukraine. But this isn't usually how democracies respond when threatened. If the Russians are saying to the South Koreans, "We are the military ally of North Korea. If you and the North get into a war, we will defend and supply the North Koreans." Well, now it's in the national security interest of South Korea that Russia fails, that Russia collapses, that Russia won't be there to help the North Koreans if there's a war on the Korean peninsula. So I think South Korea is going to do it. It's a democracy. Of course, there's a political process. It might take a couple weeks or a couple months. But I think South Korea is going to start supplying lethal aid to Ukraine because of Putin's stupid visit to Pyongyang. And I want to say categorically, don't piss off the South Koreans because they're one of the most capable economic powerhouses and militaries in the world. Let me give you some quick facts about South Korea. Geographically, it's a small country, but it's 51 million people. And they have one of the largest economies in the world. South Korea, as far as GDP, is ranked 14th. Where's North Korea on this list? It's like 138th. On top of that, when you look at the stats, what does South Korea have in their arsenal that they could donate to Ukraine? And South Korea has, on paper, the second largest military in the world. When you look at just personnel, the North Koreans are number 1. Active duty, 1.2 million, 600,000 reserve, total with paramilitary, 7.5 million. North Korea is a slave army. The Kim regime keeps their people under control by keeping everyone in the military. The South Koreans have to have a large and powerful military to stop the North Koreans from attacking them. This is just personnel, but I guarantee you South Korea has plenty of equipment to equip all of these troops. And to highlight the absurdity of Russia begging the North Koreans for a military pact, I have to share this story from 2017 in which a North Korean border guard risked his life to get across the DMZ and reach South Korea. I'll link this clip down below. I can't show violence, but this North Korean border guard stole a truck, rammed a barricade, and then ran for it. There are mines, there are electrical fences. This North Korean border guard trying to escape North Korea was shot 5 times by his comrades and had to lay in a ditch for hours before the South Koreans could rescue them. So this broadcast is from November of 2017. A year later, he was doing interviews, and this is him. This is former North Korean soldier Oh Chung-sung, and he's the son of a North Korean general. The only North Korean soldiers allowed to be posted at the DMZ are the children of elites, the children of trusted families in the Kim regime. And even this guy was willing to risk his life to get to freedom. I'll link the interview down below, but why did he do it? Why did this North Korean soldier defect from his country, never to return? And he did it for Choco Pies. North Korean defector gets a lifetime supply of Choco Pies. Choco Pies is the American equivalent of like a ding dong. It's just a sugary, cream-filled snack. But they don't have sugar in North Korea. And he tasted a Choco Pie once, and that's all he could think about. Getting to South Korea so he could get Choco Pies. So once again, this was one of North Korea's most trusted elite soldiers posted at the DMZ, and when he reached a South Korean hospital, the doctors found that he was infected with tuberculosis, hepatitis B, and his intestines were covered with parasitic worms, on top of being shot 5 times by his own comrades. This man is lucky to be alive, but yeah, I don't think North Korea is going to send soldiers to fight in Ukraine because they would murder their Russian overseers at the first opportunity to get some Choco Pies. Yeah, I think when we're drafting teams, Ukraine is better off getting the South Koreans, and Russia can take North Korea. So Putin's desperate. Putin threatens to revise the nuclear doctrine of Russia and vows to go to the end in Ukraine. Here's Putin once again threatening the world with nuclear weapons. This is what he says. They, the West, are always, as you said, turning up the heat, escalating the situation. Apparently they are counting on the fact that we will be scared at some point. But at the same time, they also say they want to achieve a strategic defeat of Russia on the battlefield. What does this mean for Russia? For Russia, it means the end of its statehood. That's what it means. It means the end of the 1,000-year history of the Russian state. I think this is clear to everyone. And then the question arises, why should we be afraid? Isn't it better to go until the end? This is simple formal logic. This is Putin saying that if they don't win this war in Ukraine, that'll be the end of Russia. And if Russia's going to end anyways, then why not fire off 6,000 nuclear warheads and try and kill as many people as possible? First of all, there was another European dictator who liked to talk about 1,000 years of the history of their nation. One, his nation survived, but it didn't end well for him. Second, Russia doesn't have 1,000 years of history. Moscow was founded in 1147, so not quite Russia, you're rounding up. But in Russia's 1,000 years of history, Russia has been defeated numerous times. Russia's actually lost more wars than they've won. Russia has survived defeats in the Crimean War, the Russo-Japanese War. Russia lost World War I. They lost their invasion of Afghanistan, and they lost the Cold War. There is national life after your country loses a war. Maybe not for you, Putin, but the Russian people are going to continue to exist in some form after Russia loses this war. What's incredible about this list is the 1920 invasion of Poland, and I didn't even know this was a thing, but apparently the Russians invaded Poland in 1919. This was after Poland and Ukraine and everyone else broke away. The Russians were trying to pull them back into their empire, rebranded under the Soviet Union, and the Russians lost this war to Poland. In the wake of the eastward Polish advance, the Soviets sued for peace, and the war ended with a ceasefire in October of 1920. The more famous example is Russia's failed invasion of Finland. They took horrendous losses, they completely embarrassed themselves. The Russians performed so poorly in this war. This war is what convinced Adolf Hitler to invade the Soviet Union. So Russia's incompetent, Russia is desperate, they're going to continue their acts of terrorism just so their own sick supporters feel like they're accomplishing something. 3 killed in a Russian strike against an apartment building in the city of Kharkiv. The video is online. I'll link this down below if you want to see it for yourself. But Russia dropped one of their Fab 500 or Fab 1000 bombs in the center of a residential area in Kharkiv. I'll link these videos. Obviously, this was all captured on CCTV. Here's a woman just doing her shopping, walking down the street in broad daylight. And that bomb is about to hit right here. I can't show videos, but I can share some pictures. This is what the damage and devastation looks like. Russia said they were trying to blow up a police station and they weren't targeting civilians. But police officers are not military personnel. It doesn't matter. Russia's going to continue being absolute evil until they're defeated. So the Pentagon now says Ukraine can use U.S. weapons anywhere across the border inside of Russia. Pentagon spokesperson Major General Patrick Ryder said that while there had been no change in policy, Kyiv's use of weapons against Russian troops was not limited just to Kharkiv. This was very confusing about a month ago. I actually said in my video a month ago the policy was going to go away if it was limited just to Kharkiv. So I think the policy is U.S. supplied weapons can be used up to 100 kilometers anywhere inside the Russian border. This covers Sumy, this covers Chernihiv. We've got Gimler's rounds, HIMARS, artillery. The only thing being held back is ATACMS with a 300-kilometer range. There are Russian air bases within ATACMS range being used to drop these Fab bombs on Kharkiv. So I think Ukraine is going to continue pressuring the United States to expand the policy. And I think within a month or two, the policy will change again. And Ukraine will be able to use the 300-kilometer variant of the ATACMS, as well as Scalp cruise missiles and Storm Shadows on these Russian air bases being used to bomb civilians in Kharkiv. Ukraine's use of Western weapons on Russian soil becomes a game changer within hours of U.S. approval. According to the first Deputy Defense Minister, there was more than 90,000 Russian troops stationed on Russian territory preparing for an attack. So the Russians did this stupid reinvasion of Kharkiv. It's been a disaster. But if it had gone well, if they had made significant advances, Yeah, they were going to attack Sumy next, and then attack Chernihiv, to just expand the front lines, try and stretch out Ukrainian defenses. But now that Ukraine can fire up to 100 kilometers inside of Russia, these troops are going away. They're being pulled back. There won't be an invasion of Sumy or an invasion of Chernihiv now. We're taking this as a victory. Russia shifts to Azov Sea for missile launches, escaping naval drones. So the Sea of Azov is located right here, and the Russian Black Sea fleet can no longer operate in the Black Sea because of Ukrainian naval drones. Ukrainian naval drones have been so effective, Russia has retreated to the Sea of Azov. Good job, Russia. Russian Panzer S air defense system reportedly hit in the Belgorod Oblast. There is a video online. I'll link it down below if you want to see it. But Russia continues to lose their air defense systems prior to the arrival of F-16s. Fire in an oil depot in Russia's Rostov Oblast finally extinguished, says the governor. So this strike occurred on June 18th. This was an oil depot in Rostov. And the fire wasn't put out until 3 days later, on June 21st. Nice. Ukrainian drone swarms swamp Russian air defenses, oil refineries, and an airfield hit. A month of Ukrainian precision strikes against Russian air defenses, particularly in Crimea, has opened the door for waves of kamikaze drones to do their stuff. Satellite images show significant destruction of an oil depot in southern Russia following a Ukrainian drone strike. So this is Rostov, airfields and oil depots all burning up. If you want to see Russia on fire at night, I'll link the clip down below. This is happening now. I don't have too many details, but apparently there's been another ISIS attack in Dagestan. About 5 Russian police officers have been killed along with a priest, and the terrorists are beheading people. I don't support this, I don't support ISIS, but this is a consequence of Russian policy in sub-Saharan Africa as well as places like Syria. The Russians have been fighting ISIS for over a decade, and I think their military is distracted, and ISIS is seizing on this opportunity to infiltrate Russia, to get inside and cause as much damage and destruction as possible. It's pretty concerning. Okay, if you've not been on Telegram or Twitter, then you've not seen this video. But I will link it down below if you want to see. It's a tragedy. So these 3 Russian soldiers are running from 2 positions, and a Ukrainian drone operator gets the one in the middle, blows out his legs. So the guy in the front just keeps going, he's not going to stop to help his comrade. But the guy behind him, seeing that his comrade was just injured, just puts a bullet in his head. He just executes him. For the average Russian soldier, they know there's no hope of being evacuated or receiving good medical treatment, or once they're returned to Russia, being cared for as a veteran. It's sad, but apparently more Russian soldiers have to experience this and see this before they stop signing contracts. Real quick story worth mentioning, UK politician Nigel Farage says the West provoked Putin to invade Ukraine. Nigel Farage, leader of the UK's Reform Party, said during a primetime TV interview that the EU and NATO incited Russia's invasion of Ukraine with its eastward expansion. So I don't know why this talking point from Russian propagandists is getting so much prominence now. They seem to be repeating this on loop, that Russia's failed invasion of Ukraine is NATO's fault. NATO, the aggressive military alliance designed to destroy Russia. When in reality, NATO is a defensive alliance that people apply to join. NATO doesn't go looking for members. NATO just exists, and people are desperate to join NATO for protection from the Russians. So Sweden and Finland joined NATO last year. Russia didn't invade Finland to stop it. Russia doesn't even talk about it. So why is it okay for the Baltics and Sweden and Finland to join NATO, but not Ukraine? Even though Ukraine had no chance of joining NATO. We'll talk about that in a second. But I want to share this interesting polling of the British people. You guys are fantastic. Here in the United States, maybe 30% of Americans have pro or sympathetic views towards Russia. But in the UK, it barely exists. Most Britons think it is important that Ukraine defeats Russia. Here's a breakdown of the Liberal Democrats, the Labour, and the Conservatives. But support for Russia in the UK is in the single digits, less than 10%, consistent across polling. So here's Nigel Farage with his close ally Donald Trump. These two and people like Viktor Orban are working for the Russians. And Donald Trump said the exact same thing the same day that Nigel Farage said the exact same thing. So it's not a coincidence. Donald Trump implies Biden's alleged support for Ukraine's NATO ascension led to the full-scale invasion. So here's exactly what Donald Trump said. Let me play this clip for you.
To make a peace deal there, would you be willing to take NATO expansion off the table if that's what it took to get the Russians and the Ukrainians to make a deal? Would you be willing to do?
So this man is David Sachs. He's a Russian propagandist. He's been doing business in Russia for decades, and he's desperate for sanctions to be lifted so he can continue making lots of money inside of Russia. But Donald Trump agreed to go on his podcast, and here's Trump's response.
And the Ukrainians to make a deal. Would you be willing to do that?
So for 20 years, I heard that NATO, if Ukraine goes into NATO, it's a real problem for Russia. I've heard that for a long time. And I think that's really why this war started. I'm not sure that this war would have started. Biden was saying all of the wrong things. And one of the wrong things, he was saying, no, Ukraine will go into NATO.
Biden never said that prior to 2022. Trump lies about everything. But this is Donald Trump saying the reason why Putin invaded Ukraine is because Ukraine wanted to join NATO. All the arguments made by Russian propagandists completely discount the sovereignty and independence of the Ukrainian people. For people who support Russia, they don't believe Ukraine has the right to self-determination. Ukraine has always been, or for the last 300 years, a subordinate people and a subordinate nation to Moscow. And for people who support Russia, they just want that to continue. So the Maidan Revolution in 2014, the United States had nothing to do with this. These were Ukrainian people sick of Russian dominion, wanting closer ties to the EU for better prosperity for themselves and their children. And what Russia wants is Ukraine never to join NATO so they can continue installing their own puppet regimes like Lukashenko in Belarus, and like they had Viktor Yanukovych, the Ukrainian president up until 2014, when he started killing his own people. Yanukovych just started murdering his own citizens for protesting. He then fled the country and is still living in exile inside of Russia. This has nothing to do with NATO. In order to join NATO, you need unanimous consent. Every NATO country has to agree and vote yes to allow new members. And you can't join NATO if you have any territorial disputes. So Ukraine was never eligible to join NATO, and as long as Hungary or Germany or France vetoed it, Ukraine was never getting in. But since the Maidan Revolution in 2014, Putin has only had one goal, one mission, to militarily take Ukraine back under his control. So here are the articles. Let me show you the proof. Russia is massing thousands of troops on Ukraine's border. This article is from September of 2016. Leading up to the 2022 invasion, Putin sent hundreds of thousands of troops into military exercises to wargame his invasion of Ukraine. Massive Russian military exercise heightens fear of troop buildup on western border. This article is from September of 2017. Poroshenko says over 80,000 Russian troops in and around Ukraine, threatening invasion this December of 2018. Are the Russians coming? Russia's military buildup near Ukraine. This article is from February of 2019. I actually think Putin wanted to invade Ukraine back in 2020 or 2021, but he held off his invasion because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Putin is such a germaphobe that he held off his invasion until his entire military could be vaccinated. Every person in Russia was forced to get the Russian vaccine. So if you think vaccines are woke or the coronavirus outbreak was a hoax, Putin didn't think that, and Putin believes in vaccines. This is how Putin responded to the COVID-19 pandemic. But here's the real reason why Putin is making all this noise about changing nuclear doctrine and wanting peace talks and negotiations if he gets everything he wants. And this is what Putin is actually thinking about. In the first half of 2024, Ukrainian drones have struck about 24 Russian oil refineries and oil infrastructure. Putin doesn't know how this is going to go for the next 6 months, heading into winter. How is Russia going to do with dozens of their oil refineries offline and half of their oil depots blown up? We're going to find out together. Let's get to the good news for Ukraine. Here's a hilarious article from the Financial Times. Serbia turns a blind eye to its ammunition ending up in Ukraine. So Belgrade exported 800 million euros worth of artillery shells to Greece or to the Czech Republic or to Italy or whoever, and all these shells ended up in Ukraine. So on paper, Serbia is supposed to be Russia's ally, but I think Serbia is pretty indifferent and kind of embarrassed at how poorly Russia's doing in this war. So they decided to sell $1 billion worth of artillery shells to Western countries. That's now helping Ukraine. The Netherlands is going to supply another Patriot system to Ukraine with some components coming from other countries, but thank you to the coalition that made this happen. Thank you to the Dutch people. Lithuania donates transformers and equipment to Ukraine as Russian strikes on energy systems persist. Thank you so much to the people of Lithuania. Final clip I have for you is from Maria Avdiva, and these are school children in Kharkiv preparing for their school graduation ceremonies. But of course, they all have to be underground because Russia keeps targeting children and bombing schools.
Що ви думали колись, що вам треба буде у підвалах так проводити?
Давайте втроем.
Ну стой, не бегай.
These are children and families who just want to live in peace, who want to be free and independent from Russia. Russia will be defeated. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.